All right, so this again is our first webinar in a series of 3 webinars related to the GradNation Acceleration Initiative. And we are excited to share the lessons learned and opportunities for next steps as we learn from these 5 sites as part of the GradNation campaign. We're going to start today with a little bit of a brief overview of our partnership with AT&T, who has been an enormous supporter of the GradNation campaign over the last decade. Then we'll dive deeper specifically into the lessons learned from our 5 acceleration sites related to holistic approaches to helping young people succeed, with opportunities to learn specifically from our partners in Promesa Boyle Heights, a community-led effort in Los Angeles that has been instrumental in seeing a 25% increase in the graduation rate at area schools. My name is Monica Kinchlow. I'm a Senior Director on the Strategic Initiatives and Partnerships team at America's Promise. And you've been hearing from my colleague Liz Glazer, a Director on the team at America's Promise. I'm pleased now to introduce Mylena Albright, Assistant Vice President of Corporate Social Responsibility at AT&T, who has been an enormous partner and support of America's Promise and the GradNation campaign, in addition to the Yes Project at America's Promise. Mylena, I'll leave it to you.
Thank you. Thank you. It always cracks me up being in quarantine and seeing my picture different places. And it's like I look nothing like any of the photographs that I have anymore, but you know, it's the new life that we lead. But good afternoon to everyone. It is really my pleasure to be here to talk about the work that we've done with America's Promise Alliance. I'd like to talk to you a bit first about the work that we're doing at AT&T. Through our AT&T Aspire initiative, we've supported education for underrepresented and underserved youth since 2008, investing $600 million. As part of our Aspire program, we've hosted several RFP and RFQ competitions to fund programs which focus on increasing graduation rates for at-risk high school students across the country. In support of this effort, we partnered early on with America's Promise Alliance to support their goal of reaching a 90% graduation rate by 2020. And to hear people talk about that 90% graduation rate at AT&T, you would think it was our goal. So we've really bought into that. In 2017, our head of CSR, Charlene Lake, challenged us to make sure we were doing all that we could do to stick with that commitment. She asked the question, what would we do if AT&T owned the goal? So we worked with America's Promise Alliance on a response. AT&T committed to working with APA as a sole investor to figure out what should come next. That same year, AT&T and America's Promise launched the Acceleration Initiative, which is a 2-year investment in 5 program sites across the U.S. that are working to improve graduation rates for specific student populations. This work was developed out of the May 2017 release of the GradNation report. It was the 8th update of this national body of work, all funded by AT&T, which highlighted that nearly all states were graduating significantly lower percentages of students of color, students from low-income families, students with disabilities, and English language learners. America's Promise worked closely with 5 sites over 2 years to learn best practices, and the work has resulted in 3 case studies, which is the focus of today's and future webinar series. Today, we're focused on lessons learned from the case study about holistic approaches to helping young people succeed. This examines the barriers to success in school and life that many of today's young people face and suggests strategies to support their holistic needs in an intentional and comprehensive way. I'd like to talk about one of the organizations highlighted in the case study, Promesa Boyle Heights, which is based in Los Angeles. I mentioned our RFP-RFQ process. This is one of our most rigorous evaluation processes, probably one of our most competitive. And Promesa Boyle Heights was a recipient of Aspire funding through that process 4 times. It really speaks volumes to their body of work. We know them well at AT&T. They've had tremendous results, and they've been a great partner. They've made significant progress with their students, more than doubling the graduation rate in their schools. So I know you'll hear more from the Promesa Boyle Heights team later, but I wanted to sing their praises just for a little bit. And as I close, I'd just like to share a personal reflection. As a woman with a similar background to many of the students that America's Promise Alliance serve, I truly understand that it takes a holistic approach to address the challenges and inequities that our children face. Education and economic opportunity is not a one-size-fits-all solution. I'm personally proud to represent AT&T as a partner of America's Promise Alliance as we continue the work to help students thrive. Thank you very much, and I'll pass it back over to you, Monica.
Mylena, thank you so much for the incredible and generous introduction of this body of work that we did co-create with you and your team a few years ago. And it's really exciting and inspiring to see it culminate in this moment, even given the wild moment we are in pandemic life and new hair. So thank you so much. So what I'm going to do is pick right back up where Mylena left off and talk a little bit more about the GradNation campaign and sort of where we are right now. So as many of you may know, the GradNation campaign is a national campaign to increase the high school graduation rate to 90% and produce graduates who are ready and well for whatever their futures hold. And with AT&T's continued partnership, we've been at this for about 10 years. And in that time, we've developed a deeply held belief in the power of uplifting community-led efforts to support young people to the gateway milestone of graduating from high school. And we do this by investing in communities through community summits, innovative program grants, and providing a platform to elevate and share best practices. These case studies are a result of the lessons learned from that 2-year investment in the Acceleration Initiative. And really the initiative was born out of years of experimentation and analysis from across the campaign, which is really comprised of a number of community efforts and national organizational efforts. We conducted a qualitative and quantitative analysis about efforts that had worked in the past to understand which groups of young people needed more support to reach the 90% goal. We then put out a request for proposals based on that analysis and invited applications from community and statewide efforts across the United States. We asked applicants to meet 2 basic requirements. One was that they needed to include a direct connection to at least 2 sections of our GradNation action platform, which you see on the slide. The action platform identifies 6 areas of strategies that, when implemented together, improve graduation rates. And we came to this action platform based on the collective experience and expertise of individuals at organizations engaged with young people across the country, the experience of young people themselves, as seen in our DON'T reports, and our own research. The action platform areas are seemingly simple, deceptively simple, but they work. It's using high quality data, responding to the non-academic factors, improving school climate, strengthening adult relationships, providing pathways to post-secondary life, and re-engaging young people who have left school without graduating. Applicants were also encouraged to describe programs that supported specific groups of students who, in the federal data, were furthest from reaching 90%. So in this way, the communities highlighted in these case studies reflect 2 critical priorities in the national effort to improve graduation rates. First, evidence-based best practice from a whole child view, and second, a laser focus on groups of students that need more robust supports than have been provided to date. We believe this is the formula for closing the gap from an 85 to 90% graduation rate. I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Liz, who's going to tell us a little bit more about the acceleration sites themselves. Liz, you're muted.
Thank you. Trying to keep quiet. I appreciate that reminder. So my name is Liz, as Monica mentioned, and I've been working with the acceleration sites basically since the onset of their start with America's Promise. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what that looked like. As Monica mentioned, in 2017, we put out this request for proposals, asking applicants at the state level and the community level to describe their integrated approaches to helping students succeed to high school graduation and beyond. In early 2018, we announced who those winners were, which were 3 community-driven efforts and 2 statewide efforts. The 3 community-driven efforts were Promesa Boyle Heights, who are predominantly working with English learners in the Boyle Heights neighborhood of Los Angeles and are joining us today, so you'll hear from them quite a bit. The Greeley Alternative Program, a district-wide approach to supporting students off track credit-wise to graduation, and Mission Graduate, which is part of the United Way of Central New Mexico, working with predominantly Hispanic students at a low graduation rate high school in Albuquerque. And the two statewide efforts were Jobs for Michigan's Graduates, which was working with low-income students and students of color across low-performing high schools in the state of Michigan, and Project Graduate 2.0, a partnership between the State Child Welfare Agency and a youth-supporting nonprofit who support youth in foster care across the state of Georgia. And that was a total of about $800,000 investment across all of these programs for a 2-year partnership. Through the 2-year partnership, we sought to learn from the sites about what practices really help students succeed. So the sites participated in a learning agenda, which is a systematic approach to asking questions and documenting what we learned using a qualitative analysis software. The learning agenda allowed us to test hypotheses about how communities are meeting the needs of diverse learners. Sites participated in the learning agenda by engaging in many learning activities throughout the course of the 2-year grant period. These activities included interview-style phone calls, cohort-wide virtual convenings like this one to discuss problems of practice, in-person site visits to hear from young people and their practitioners across communities, cohort-wide technical assistance and individual technical assistance convenings, and annual reports where we asked the sites to reflect on lessons learned, areas for growth, and strategies that they had seen. From these data, we analyzed for themes across the site, for themes in practice. We found that even though the strategies may have differed and the student groups were different across communities, there were clear commonalities in approaches across all of the sites. As we continued to learn from them, we wanted to amplify their stories of progress in a way that drew those themes, but also how their values and practices can be tailored to any community that wants to try. The themes from the learning agenda led to the development of a 3-part case study series. Each brief features all 5 sites from the acceleration cohort, and each brief dives deep into different themes. So the focus of today's theme is holistic approaches to helping young people succeed. Obviously, that's today. And then our second webinar is building responsive pathways to graduation and beyond, the focus of the second case study. And the third case study and webinar are creating effective youth supporting partnerships. So we'll dive into those other themes a little bit later, but today's webinar is focused on our holistic approaches to helping young people succeed. And this is really rooted in this very important idea, which is that throughout our 2 years, we learned that holistically supporting young people was a foundational commitment and action across every single site. So every program had a different goal, a different strategy, and different student populations. They were all building a system in which a young person's comprehensive needs could be met. So what this looked like are some of these examples on the screen. Jobs for Michigan's Graduates talked about having work-ready competencies that were a blend of academic and cognitive skills and social-emotional skills. In Greeley, they were preparing for college and career. In Promesa, they wanted to provide holistic support without harm. There was a goal in Georgia to support youth in foster care so they could be connected and supported. And in New Mexico, they developed something called the Profile of a Graduate, which is a pretty beautiful hot air balloon with different sort of colors of skills. And the different skills represent things like math and knowing how to budget, as well as knowing how to resolve conflict and handle trauma. So a blend of social, emotional, and cognitive skills. That's kind of what we learned about the holistic support foundational values. So I'm going to turn it back over to Monica so she can introduce Promesa.
All right, thanks so much, Liz. So I'm pleased today to introduce Promesa Boyle Heights, who Marlena already got us started with. Promesa Boyle Heights is a collective action organization connected to Proyecto Pastoral, serving the Boyle Heights neighborhood in Los Angeles, California. It has been a delight working with them through the Acceleration Initiative over the last few years and learning about their commitment and how they actualize a commitment to equity, racial equity, and community building. Today, I'm pleased to introduce 3 colleagues from Promesa Boyle Heights, Claudia Lara, Carolina Couto, and Jennifer Vega, who are joining from Los Angeles. So I think to start, I'm gonna hand it over to Carolina, who's gonna give us a little bit of an overview of all of the amazing work Promesa Boyle Heights does.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Monica, for that introduction. I really appreciate you. I'll begin by sharing a little bit about myself. I've been part of the Promesa team as the Senior Community School Coordinator at Roosevelt High School for the past 5 years. This work is really dear to my heart because I share the same life experiences as the students and families that we serve. Those life experiences have supported and informed the work I lead as a community school coordinator. So now we'd like to share with you an overview of our work by going from the macro to the micro. We will also share throughout the presentation Promesa's strategic response to the pandemic and the uprisings. So Boyle Heights is a vibrant community in the east side of Los Angeles. Once defined by our struggling schools, gun violence, and neglected infrastructure, Boyle Heights is now becoming a model for how residents and organizations can come together to address critical issues in their community. Boyle Heights is a tight-knit community that is resilient, resourceful, and has a history rich in social justice advocacy. If you take a look at this map, you'll get to see some of the school sites we work at and our partners. You'll also get to see the parameters of Boyle Heights. Boyle Heights has a population of almost 100,000 residents living within 6.5 square miles, making it among the highest densities in the city of Los Angeles and the county of Los Angeles. The average family income is about $33,000, meaning that roughly 1 in 3 families live below the federal poverty line, with a high risk of displacement due to gentrification. As far as education, only about 5% of residents above the age of 25 have a 4-year degree, which is low for the city and low for the county. All of our schools that we work with are Title I schools and serve a student population that is 98% Latino, and more than 90% of our students qualify for free or reduced lunch based on the federal poverty guidelines. Boyle Heights is also sandwiched between 5 major freeways and 3 industrial sites that are documented toxic release sites. So that's just to give you an overview of our parameters. Now I'll share with you our vision and mission. Promesa's mission is to improve conditions in Boyle Heights at the individual, school, and systems level by building a movement of partner organizations, students and families collaborating to close the opportunity gap and strengthen supports from cradle through college and career. Our vision is that every individual has access to a range of supports in the home, in our schools, and the community to foster school and life success. Organizations are collaborating, well-functioning, and closing the opportunity gap amongst the most marginalized and underserved populations in our community. And finally, a powerful resident-led collaborative is winning system-level policy changes that create a safer, healthier, and more stable Boyle Heights. What does our model look like? Promesa is a community-led collective impact initiative made up of residents, students, educators, and public-private partners working together to build a cradle to college and career continuum of supports. Our unique model elevates students and adults as leaders and decision makers in the community and in school transformation. Promesa's role within the ecosystem is to serve as a cultivator of action-based partnerships. This means that we build partnerships and convene partners with aligned visions to understand community needs, trends, and to identify shared goals to implement diverse strategies that result in individual, school, and community change. Secondly, we are capacity builders. We build the capacity of institutions that serve Boyle Heights and build residents' leadership capacity. And lastly, we're organizers. We build residents' collective power to impact the policies and practices that affect their quality of life. If you can see on our diagram there, our core focus areas include early education, school transformation, college and career, and finally, community transformation. As part of our role, Promesa Boyle Heights has been leading the strategic response to the pandemic and the uprisings. This process has looked like doing needs assessments that included partner check-ins, community school surveys, student and parent calls. Secondly, we created a localized resource guide with the intention that is as specific as possible to Boyle Heights by vetting all the information to ensure the student and family needs were met. And lastly, through our collaboration with California Community Foundation, we have distributed nearly $100,000 to more than 90 Boyle Heights families, prioritizing families who may not have been able to access federal, state, or city emergency COVID response funds, such as undocumented families in our community. Now we'd like to give you a little bit more in-depth conversation about what our community school model looks like. Our community school model is a core strategy and has been key in achieving our vision by ensuring that we are exploring trends in students' achievement, that we're identifying gaps in student supports, that we're creating an early warning indicator tracking systems for our schools that we work with, and connecting high potential students to targeted interventions. Promesa's model has been central to increasing academic achievement and graduation rates and college going rates in Boyle Heights. As a community school coordinator, I am responsible for this work, and I'm the liaison between our community partners and the EL coordinator. The four major components of our model are, if you can see there, college access, readiness, and persistence. What this looks like is building a college-going culture through school-wide events such as career days. We focus on transitions. So we have created summer bridge programming for incoming 6th graders and 9th graders, and our Avances series, which is a series of supports for students who are college goers. Our focus on wellness and health. This looks like ensuring that we're providing and collaborating with partners to do a wellness series and also a network of promotoras in our schools who are connecting students and families to wellness resources. And lastly, a focus on high potential students. Our English Learner Acceleration Initiative is a prime example of this, and of course the centerpiece for today's webinar. Our reach currently is that we're working with 2 high schools and a middle school and a continuation school. For Mendez High School, our reach is about 996 students. For Roosevelt High School, we have a reach of 1,400 or so students, and at Hollenbeck Middle School, we have a reach of over a little 1,000 students. Excuse me, my apologies. Next, I'll share with you, as you can see in this graph, in this timeline, there are key events in expanding and deepening our community school model and its impact on high school graduation rates. We started our work at Mendez back in 2010, and the graduation rate was about 35%. It increased to 96% in 2016 and has remained about 89% since we started our work. We started our work at Roosevelt High School about 5 years ago, and back then the graduation rate was about 40%. It is now at about 83%. None of this would have been possible without our resident leaders or partners and funders such as AT&T that believed in our vision and have invested in our work. My colleague Claudia will now give you an overview of our English Learner Acceleration Initiative, which was launched in partnership with America's Promise Alliance and GradNation. As we began to celebrate our early successes, a closer look at the data revealed that subpopulations like English learners did not share the same gains as the rest of the population, and in some cases, the graduation rates were decreasing. Claudia will share with you highlights of our strategy and response. Claudia?
Thanks, Caro. I'm happy to share some insight into our English Learner Initiative and a little bit about myself. I, for one, look exactly the same as the picture that we shared with you all, and that was a while back. I serve as the English Learner Coordinator across 3 different school sites and as the Community School Coordinator for Mendez High School. I've been with Promesa close to a year in this role, but have also worked with the collaborative in the past under different capacities. I myself grew up in Boyle Heights, and I attended neighborhood schools, and I actually graduated from one of the high schools we served many, many years ago. Being able to work with my community to create positive change is truly a blessing. I can ride my bike to work, even though I don't, and I feel that being deeply embedded in many parts of our community has been a great advantage to the community school work that I do with Promesa. As an immigrant myself and a child of a monolingual Spanish-speaking mother, language justice is very, very close to my heart. The EL initiative, like Caro mentioned, was born as an extension of a SPARK project, the High Potential Scholars Cohort, which was launched back in the 2015-2016 school year. The project aimed to support the needs of high school seniors who were very close to being on track for high school graduation through the use of restorative justice academic circles. We served about 40 students through this High Potential Scholars Cohort, and out of those 40 students, 38 of them were able to graduate with their peers. To increase the number of students graduating high school in Boyle Heights, Promesa's English Learner Acceleration Project is focused on raising the achievement of 2 high-need English learner subgroups. That's long-term English learners, or LTELs, and newcomer ELs. This project has not only deepened our existing community school initiative at Mendez High School and Roosevelt High School, but it also expanded to Boyle Heights High School, a continuation school located on the Roosevelt campus. Our activities focus on 4 of GradNation's action platforms, which are using quality data to identify, monitor, and plan interventions for struggling ELs, addressing non-academic factors affecting EL school performance and engagement, such as trauma and social emotional concerns, cultivating caring adult relationships to support ELs, and also re-engaging EL youth who have left traditional high schools. Rooted in our community organizing approach, we also focus on engaging parents in building power to achieve meaningful, equity-focused changes in policy and practice at the school and system levels. We offer a variety of workshops that share information on topics such as EL rights, achievement gaps, systems and programs, and best practices for supporting EL programs, EL progress, the reclassification process, and college readiness, amongst other topics. Finally, we work with schools and partners to increase schools' capacity to better understand and respond to the varying needs of long-term and newcomer English learner students. In collaboration with the community school team, we've helped develop and institutionalize systems, processes, and programs that support English learner students across the 3 sites. As of 2016, the Promesa Collaborative actually voted to make LGBTQ and English learner support a priority and formalized this work as a core strategy through a voting process. This is important because it solidifies the commitment to English learners in our community, regardless of grant funding specific to this work. We are letting the work lead the funding and not the other way around. The EL program administered a 2019 end of the year evaluation survey where students were able to report on their experience with college prep curriculum, staff members, and overall program effectiveness. The results of the EL program end of year evaluation revealed that students are more confident now in regards to their ability to reclassify as an English speaker and where to receive help if they need it. The students also report that they are more efficient and more confident to graduate high school, being able to identify supportive services and adults on their journeys thanks to the EL program. The survey also showed that an overwhelming majority of students plan on moving on to college after high school. Students did agree that a successful high school graduation needs to have a lot of personal effort on their part, although they do acknowledge various resources exist to support them. Finally, student feedback revealed that they wished to have more time with the EL program during the school year, as well as possibly creating a more innovative curriculum to liven up the college journey and their feelings of inclusivity amongst their peers. All of these suggestions were taken into account, and we actually implemented many changes to the program that we offered to the students according to their feedback. I hope we were able to paint a picture of our Promesa model and the EL initiative. We're gonna send it back to Liz.
Thank you, both Claudia and Carolina, for that great overview of Promesa. We've obviously gotten to know the team at Promesa very well over the last 2 years, and we're very happy that they're able to share more about their model and program with you. So just a reminder, if you have more questions for them, they did cover a lot, you're welcome to put them in the Q&A box, and we can discuss our questions towards the end of the webinar. And if you have questions about their work and program, you can also put it in the chat, and we'll try to send you relevant links. So we are very happy that they're here today. Just as a reminder, throughout the webinar, we're going to be sharing some themes from these case studies and really trying to bring them to life through examples from Promesa. So I'm going to start diving into the lessons that we learned from the case study, but they'll also be trying to share a little bit of how they're maybe adapting these strategies in the context of COVID-19. So we encourage you to continue asking questions. So to really dive into the lessons learned from the case studies, the first overarching theme we found is that all of our acceleration sites value people over programs. This means that the central tenet for each program is not about increasing enrollment numbers or offering multiple types of programs. It's about building supportive, trusting relationships between adults and young people, designing supports that make young people feel respected and cared about. We heard time and time again that the young people these organizations were working with felt motivated to pursue their goals because adults who supported them took them seriously and focused on personalizing their support and encouragement to match what each student shared. This personalized approach really means that adults provide more than academic instruction or after-school tutoring. For many, they become mentors or fill a role of a trusted adult that research shows is critical for youth to thrive. Let me try this. So young people succeed when they are embedded in a supportive a system comprised of many individuals across schools, at home, in community, at work or service settings, and those adults provide different levels of trust and development. The acceleration sites across all of these connect young people to school services, out-of-school programs and activities, and other community organizations that can help meet specific needs when the time arises. As every young person begins to build a more trusting relationship with the adults at the site, they are embedded in a larger community of support, which we heard a little bit from in the Promesa overview. This is what we mean when we say that people are more important than programs. So to turn it back to the Promesa team, we're going to just ask, what does it mean to you to support students holistically and to put people over programs?
Thank you, Liz. Yeah, so at Promesa, our entire model for approaching the work is people-centered. Naturally, all our initiatives place our participants at the center of decision-making and program implementation. We share a vision of, for our students, schools, and community that holds high expectations for academic success, as well as social, emotional, and psychological health and economic supports for youth success, and supporting overall community well-being. Our core values and goals include building power, capacity, and confidence among families, youth, and residents, that community members are able to advocate for their needs, that we continue to use a bottom-up, community-driven, and inclusive approach to our work, and that we are in collaboration with a range of partners. Growing up in Boyle Heights, there weren't many times when my family was asked what we wanted, needed, or what kind of change we wanted to see in our community. As a resident who has witnessed our community struggle through gang violence, gentrification, and underrepresentation, I can't emphasize enough how important it is to place residents at the center of efforts for community transformation. Promesa actually came about via a 2-year planning process that brought together hundreds of residents, youth, community organizations, schools, and other allies to reflect on the gains and challenges in the Boyle Heights community. We surveyed over 4,000 Boyle Heights residents and brought them together to plan in General Assembly meetings. It was these residents who developed and prioritized short and long-term goals and strategies that were informed by their lived experiences, needs, and research. And to us, this is what it truly means to be people-centered. The way we approach our work with the youth is no different. We don't assume we know what they need or seek to impose programs, regardless of our knowledge and expertise. Instead, we ask. Through surveys, conversations, and assessments, we can learn what the youth need from us. This means that the same program looks differently across the 3 schools we serve. It is highly individualized, and this is important because even though we are in the same community, the needs at each school are unique. Holistic support means we intentionally build programs with a social emotional approach. We are implementing a participant-centered framework by shifting the paradigm towards an asset-based approach, from what's wrong with you to what is right with you and how do we build on that. Everything from language like naming struggling students high potential scholars versus at risk, or how we choose to bring students together. For example, we adopted a restorative justice circle approach even for our educational workshops because it sets the foundation for building trusting relationships. Creating a space for these relationships to flourish is of utmost importance to us. We want the youth to trust us enough to say, I need this, can you help me? When the students walk into the classroom, they are greeted at the door by their name. Chairs are set up in a circle with an altar at the center, and the altar includes items that are special to the group and can be agreed upon during the first session. Students can also bring items to place on the altar that are special to them. We have community agreements that are honored while we are in circle, such as a talking piece, listening practices, and modeling respect. The intention is that we are creating a safe space where students can truly feel heard and seen. Structuring our meetings with students in this way allows for relationship building to be at the heart of the sessions. I personally really enjoy being able to incorporate these types of circles into the work I do with the youth because they are already a part of my Indigenous culture. And I truly believe that sharing something that is so sacred to me with my students brings a sense of vulnerability to the work and allows for genuine bonding. I'd like to share a story about one of our students, Jose, who through the trust that was fostered during these restorative practices, felt safe enough to share that he was struggling with his immigration situation. We were actually able to connect him with resources that he needed and helped him through the entire process of his immigration case. Although it has been difficult to continue this type of individualized support during distance learning, we have been able to adapt to serve the current needs of our students and schools. For example, at Roosevelt High School, our EL team called every single student on the English learner roster. That's nearly 300 calls. We were able to check in with them regarding their family's overall well-being, academic and technological needs, and other challenges they might be facing, such as food insecurity or access to healthcare. We were also able to continue our in-classroom visits through Zoom, and we put together a resource guide specific to what the students expressed they wanted, like virtual exercise and cooking classes in Spanish. We are currently planning our continued response to distance learning and developing ways to best support our students virtually. So I hope we can do a good job at that coming up in the fall semester. And I'll send it back to you.
Claudia, just incredible. Thank you so much. I feel like you actually just wrote the brief that we published a few weeks ago. The work is just really incredible. And Liz and I were, and Dennis, I think, who's on the webinar today, we all got to see it in action. And it really is remarkable, the level of trust and credibility that Promesa has within the school buildings. So we're going to shift a little bit now to another big lesson learned, which may seem self-evident, but our sites really, I think, shine through in meeting the needs of diverse young people by building structures for support. So to create a supportive system for youth, the adults have to create reliable structures. These structures for support reflect intentionality of the adults in meeting the social, emotional, and physical needs of the young people they serve. Every acceleration site used some type of intentional structure, including high quality data, to prompt tailored supports and empower young people. Many people think that data are only from formal reports and research or federally reported metrics that demonstrate performance. And while those are important, community partners use other methods to collect more pertinent information about what young people are experiencing. So through early warning systems, personalized self-reported student surveys, and check-ins with families and young people, program leads can get a real sense of what's happening in a young person's life. This is the data that contributes to a personalized action plan to identify and activate the supports that an individual may need. For example, a math tutor, a peer mentor, consultation with a counselor, or money for the bus. The trusting relationships that Claudia just spoke to enable community organizations to develop real-time data about student needs and match it quickly. The second programmatic element we saw across the board among acceleration sites was focused on building structured activities that deepen relationships. And in this case, we're actually talking about relationships among and between peers, between youth and adults, and among adults. Some of those structured activities we just heard about with the RJ circles and other activities in the classroom that give space for relationship building and learning new skills. Other activities include group and individual counseling sessions and advocacy training that empower young people to reflect on their lives and serve other youth like them. So turning again to the Boyle Heights team, Promesa Boyle Heights team, what data guides your work with young people in Boyle Heights? And what examples can you share about how these structures provide holistic support?
Thanks, Monica. Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, our data collection is in itself people-centered. Not only do community members drive our needs assessments, but they also have direct input in creating and improving strategies. As we continue to develop specific targeted responses, we are intentionally using data that is listening to student voices, understanding needs and barriers for student success, and simultaneously helping us break down silos and perceived walls between school and community and helping to spread best practices. For example, findings from a Promesa survey of over 1,000 individuals indicates persistent gaps in access to physical and mental health services, with participants noting transportation, immigration status, and financial circumstances as key barriers for them. Young males were more likely to report they had not received health services in the past year, or that they did not have someone to talk to when a problem arises in school, home, or work. In addition, women were 14% more likely to report transportation as a barrier, and men were 8% more likely to report a language barrier. This data drove the development of a campaign to bring a wellness center to the Mendez High School campus. The survey results highlighted that young people, specifically young men and those who are undocumented, needed access to wellness resources, which included mental and dental health. Being aware that immigration status, poverty, and language inequalities disproportionately affect our English learners and newcomer youth and their families, We know that making this type of resource available to them would greatly benefit their holistic well-being. I'm happy to share that in December of 2019, the Boyle Heights community celebrated the groundbreaking for the construction of the new wellness center. The center is set to open November of this year. And so as you can see, although the focus of the EL initiative is to help youth graduate, we realize that for our community, health can be a big barrier to that. If you're not well physically or mentally, it's gonna be really hard to do well academically. And this is an example of how our work to support the EL youth is layered and intersectional. Another example of this is our work to organize parents and community members through a resident-led governance structure and cross-issue organizing team. Promesa's goal is to work with the community, not on behalf of, to move away from simply engaging residents and toward building leadership and collective power to achieve meaningful, equity-focused changes in policy and practice at the school and system level. Some of the structures that support this are our steering committee meetings and the Comité de Líderes. These structures offer the opportunity for family engagement and advocacy training. Through these structures, we intentionally align educational efforts with community organizing by creating a bridge between the school parent centers and Promesa's resident leader committees. Parents and family members of English learners have the opportunity to not only learn about issues that affect their students, but also to become deeply involved in creating change within their community. From these experiences, our parent leaders helped develop and launch a newcomer welcome center at Roosevelt High School, complete with school level changes for how we enroll students who are not only new to the school, but often also new to the country. Additionally, Promesa recently hired a director of impact and continuous improvement. This is a new position dedicated to supporting data collection and learning. Our director has elevated and deepened our ability to use data to better inform our strategies and initiatives. And we are constantly seeking to grow capacity building opportunities for Promesa and our partners. I hope I answered your questions. Sending it back to you.
You did. And I think one of the things I wanted to touch on, it's related to structures, but also our action platform at the top. I think Promesa responds to non-academic factors in a way that so clearly articulates that often what's happening outside of the classroom is impacting your ability to perform inside of it. And I think Promesa understands that need really deeply. So thank you for sharing some of those examples. So one of the important lessons that we learned was that organizations and programs to support young people really need to create a sense of belonging. Building trusting relationships and creating these supportive systems that we've heard about reflect a crucial foundational value. A sense of belonging is critical to young people's success. So across the Acceleration Initiative, communities help youth develop skills to learn how to empower and advocate for themselves. They work with youth on identifying their own unique needs and telling the adults around them what those needs are. They also identify their unique assets and tell adults what those assets are. Then those adults work to actually meet those needs and celebrate their assets. When students and youth see that they are listened to and know that they are supported, they start to build a stronger feeling of connection to the adults around them and to their peers. It's also important to note that the programs in the cohort have a full web of peers and adults who work together to address the non-academic factors we've discussed and navigate the experiences that impact learning. Many youth are navigating complex systems of immigration or the foster care system. Other young people may struggle accessing essentials like knowing how to navigate public transit or not having enough food for the weekend. When all stakeholders involved provide the necessary resources to each and every young person to make it through their own specific circumstances, those young people feel that they are cared for and that their community respects them. I think we're going to ask Jennifer now to talk a little bit about herself and answer the question of why a sense of belonging is so important to Promesa. Can you share some examples as well of how you've built that out?
Those are some good questions, and I think sharing a bit about myself will help me better answer them. My name is Jennifer, and I've been a part of the Promesa team for the past 2 years. I have served as a peer mentor for the EL initiative during that time. I myself grew up in Boyle Heights and was able to graduate from Mendez High School, which luckily was one of the school sites we served. I began working with Promesa when I started attending college, so there wasn't much of an age gap between me and the students, which allowed us to have a better connection. Being a peer mentor, I was able to facilitate monthly mentoring sessions where we focused on skill building, community building, and provided information and resources. For me, already feeling a part of the community and schools made it easier to help students feel like they also belonged. A sense of belonging is so important to Promesa because we know that newcomer EL students arrive not knowing the language, which creates a language barrier to making friends. In addition, EL students need a place to amplify their voice for their academic, linguistic, and social emotional needs without feeling like they're the only ones with such needs. Students also feel the pressure of graduation with the extra language classes that are added to the regular classes they already need to take. Furthermore, students feel more comfortable with parent engagement throughout their academic years. As a team, we have been able to build a sense of belonging for the students by bringing them together for our sessions regardless of their grade level. At first, students were shy and weren't participating fully, but with the use of team builders and discussions to get to know one another, we were able to note the positive socialization changes from shy to confident. We also hosted one-on-one sessions with the students and were able to get to know them more, which has helped us create group sessions regarding what they would like to know more about. These sessions were about the A through G requirements and our personal college experiences, where we were able to answer their questions regarding college. These one-on-ones also helped build strong mentor and student relationships to the point where we could be on campus and they would come up to us and ask when the next session would be. From student surveys, we were able to know that the students found our advice to be very helpful and would like to continue to talk about ways to improve their GPA and understand the requirements to go to college. We can continue building belonging in a virtual environment by giving the students a place to keep in touch with one another over Zoom. As a current college student, I know that having a group that you can reach out to during these times is very beneficial. To build in the sense of belonging, we can place students into smaller groups and assign them into breakout rooms during Zoom calls so they can further get to know one another. They can exchange numbers or their school emails so that they can be able to talk to each other when they have any questions about schoolwork. And we also strive to help students learn about resources available for them both in and out of school. I hope I was able to answer the questions and will now pass back to Liz.
You definitely answered them well. And I think, well, I'm just stuck on the idea of just giving them a Zoom to be on breakout rooms. And I think we've talked about this before from the professional perspective. We're on Zoom a lot during the day, but for young people, they're either tuning into school or they're at home. So I just really love the idea of giving them a virtual space to bond that's less professional and more about belonging. I think that's a great strategy. So we're going to talk a little bit about some next steps because our discussion so far has shown examples of key values shared across our acceleration sites. We think that those lessons learned are very valuable, and we also think that you can implement them in your own community. So for the next few minutes, we're going to share a few examples of considerations you can take into account to help you develop more holistic approaches to supporting young people in your own community. So first, it's important to value whole child efforts equally to academic pursuits. To create graduates who are ready and well, we need to focus on academic success in relation to well-being, which means that every adult stakeholder must understand that young people show up at school and in community as more than simply students. The second core value is making young people a key part of the decision-making process about policies, practices, and environments that impact them. When youth play a role in the development and implementation of youth-supporting efforts, they are more likely to feel like they are being heard and cared for, and thus are more connected. I have an example on the slide about a youth in foster care in Georgia who felt like his needs weren't being met at a school meeting, and he felt like he wasn't going to fit in the school. And alternatively, throughout this webinar, we've heard several examples of Promesa asking young people what their needs are and then making decisions around those needs. So it can be done, and we think it's really powerful when it is. Another concrete next step that you can take in your own community is to train every single stakeholder with a goal of becoming a trusted adult as part of a supportive youth system. As we mentioned earlier, young people interact with all kinds of adults every day in their lives. Parents, teachers, counselors, their aunt and uncle, a mentor, a program director, and more all interact with students every day. So those adults whether they're part of a program or part of a community, must each be given the tools necessary to value their students holistically and to support their needs. Collective action organizations and out-of-school organizations, much like Promesa, can often play a really important role in connecting and training adults in a community, given their roles in community, because they know a lot of the partners, they know a lot of the members of the community, and they know the youth. So they're very great people that you can lean on in training stakeholders. And they also have connections to a lot of service providers. So another very important action that you can take, and you can start it today, is to reinforce youth assets when engaging with young people or engaging with other adults. So what this means is supportive adults can ask questions using an asset frame to young people instead of a deficit frame. For example, if you're doing an intake interview and you want to ask, what do you want to improve about your academics? You could instead ask, what would you need to thrive academically? And that gives young people the chance to say, oh, these are my needs that I need so that I can pass my test or do whatever it is. An initial survey or interview could be an opportunity for a young person to share what would improve their well-being and how their school system could contribute to that. Consistently reinforcing assets about young people to themselves and to adults also contributes to a sense of belonging within the community. I think these are just a few examples of the next steps that you can take. Our case study has these pulled out a little bit more deeply if you want to read them, and we're also happy to answer any discussion questions, but I think that is the end of our sort of content presentation. So I might take us off of screen share so you can just see all of our faces for the questions. If I can get to it. Ooh. Having some trouble here. There we go.
So that does conclude our prepared presentation, and we hope that this framing and content, and particularly the examples from Promesa Boyle Heights work with English learners and high school students generally, generate some ideas for you. We covered most, but not all of the content of the brief, so really encourage all of you to take a look at the linked PDF that's been put in the chat. And we do encourage you to take a look at the full case study for more background on how each site is holistically supporting specific groups of young people. So at this time, we'll take some questions. There hasn't been a lot in the Q&A function, so I want you to, take this time to percolate a little bit and think about what you might want to ask. I think some things that have come to mind for me, we heard a little bit about planned adaptations in a virtual learning setting. I think Jennifer being really clear, like, Zoom rooms for young people is actually an effective way to bring them together and keep that sense of belonging going. So appreciate that perspective. I think a lot of Promesa Boyle Heights' success really involves close partnership with schools. So for any of you on our webinar that are in schools or school systems or supporting schools, maybe there's a question in there for you to the Promesa team about how to keep up those strong relationships. Your grad rate doesn't go up 25 percentage points for nothing. So I just want to put that up there. I also think we heard a lot about the incredible value that Promesa Boyle Heights puts on surveying and getting data from the community. So from parents and families, from young people. How does one do that? I'm not personally familiar with that survey tool. So what is it? Maybe that's piquing some questions for you. Just giving you all some time to consider if you have anything. And there are multiple boxes at the bottom of your screen. There's the chat function and the Q&A one. So please feel free to put any questions in there.
Hey, Monica, this is Kellum with AT&T.
Please.
How are you? So I'll chime in with more of a comment, but just Mylena early in the discussion talked about the fact that we've supported Promesa and Proyecto Pastoral through our RFP and RFQ going back to 2012, and I've actually had the chance to do site visits 2 or 3 times at Boyle Heights there, because which was just fantastic to go to Mendez High and then later to Roosevelt High, and it's just been amazing to see the growth and the progress. Mendez is a much smaller high school, and they were able to turn around the graduation rate there significantly. I think they didn't mention that at one point it showed the highest growth graduation rate, I think, either in the state of California, I think, not just LAUSD, but in the state of California. So they made tremendous strides there. And then later in a later RFP, that one of the later RFPs we did, we worked with them to take on Roosevelt High School, which is one of those massive high schools with, it was thousands of students. So it's one thing to work with a small school and really show success, but to then try to tackle the challenges and issues of a larger school and be successul with it is really incredible. So I look forward to the continued future success of Promesa Boyle Heights and Proyecto Pastoral and the work that they're doing.
Thank you, Callum. That was really illuminating, and I know that when we announced our partnership with Promesa, we were so excited to know about AT's partnership and involvement as well, because I think Promesa's sort of longstanding commitment to their students and their community is so evident with the fact that so many national organizations are interested in them. We've gotten a few questions in the chat box, although I did sound like you were going to say something else. Okay.
No, I was going to say that we didn't, you guys did, we didn't have anything to do with Promesa joining, being a part of this effort. They applied for it and you guys selected them. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, we had no idea that there was this interest, so we just think that speaks really highly of Promesa, and so we're always glad to share your highlights and pride. We have gotten a few questions, so I'm going to ask one, which is sort of hearing from the perspective of the Promesa team. Which aspects of your work do you think are the most important or more important in being able to improve graduation rates?
I'll try to take that on, and then if the team has anything to add, please feel free to do so. I think relationships are at the core of our work. The way that we engage with our schools, the way that we engage with parents and students is really through building really strong and genuine relationships. We use a organizers model, meaning that we have constant communication with our partners or students in schools. We hold bi-weekly meetings with the administration at our schools. We hold one-on-ones with our partners on a monthly or bi-weekly basis. Our Comité de Líderes, like our Cynthia mentioned in the chat, really wanted to continue to be felt part of and continue communication. So we moved our bi-weekly meetings to weekly meetings. Same thing with our partners during COVID. They requested that instead of having monthly meetings that we move to bi-weekly meetings. So I think for sure one of the key elements is ensuring that we're building strong relationships and that we're in constant communication.
Thank you. I think that's really important. Relationships are such a key to success. Another question that a few people are interested in is if you could give some examples of specific team building activities or icebreakers you've done with your young people to support building trust.
Jennifer, would you like to share a little bit about what we've done with the students?
Yeah. So what I could remember, we did some where we had them use their journal and they would draw out like what represents them. So like some could draw like what they're part of, like clubs, or like if they have after school activities, or like if they wanted how many siblings, how many like parents, just things that this describe them, and put it into like a big drawing or like a chart around like a stick figure that represented them. And after a while, they would each share out to the other students, and we went around the circle just explaining how each one represents ourselves. Another activity, it was more towards like a goal-driven kind of activity. So we gave them a little slip of paper and they would draw, not they would write out their goal for either their academic year or just anything in their personal lives, and they would fold it up, and it would be passed around the circle for like about less than a minute, and then it would stop at any moment, and the person that is left with a card has to read it out and like give advice on how to reach that goal. So I kind of feel like that made them more responsive to how everyone else in the circle is feeling and like the different types of goals that are in the group. So I think that just brought them more closer together and like helping each other reach their goal. Those are just some.
Thank you, Jen. Yeah, we also did some very like simple kind of like getting to know you activities at the beginning, like to be able to learn each other's names. For example, you know, an activity where you have to try to memorize in order like all the names of the people who are standing in the circle. And it's pretty challenging, you know, especially when you have a group of like 10 or more. And so there's a lot of laughs that happen very genuinely, naturally throughout that process of trying to remember names and messing up and, you know, kind of having to start over. And so just being able to have fun together as a way in the process of getting to know each other, I think kind of sets up the mood as well for having a trusting and safe space where you can kind of be yourself, you know, and be a little goofy sometimes. And so things like that, sort of games or even challenges where something like you have to work together in a group to build something with specific parameters. We use like marshmallows and toothpicks to like build a structure, and whichever, you know, with parameters, and whichever team builds the strongest structure, you know, gets a little prize or things like that. Just that really, again, foster communication, teamwork, and just having fun.
And if you don't mind, I want to give an example of one activity we observed on our site visit last May. I thought it was really interesting. There was this classroom instructions. It was on a Friday, and everyone came together, and they were playing a game, kind of like the game of life, but life was going to college. And so you like rolled a die, or there was a ball or something, and it presented you with a challenge, like, oh, you need to pay your student loan, but the bursar said you're not getting your refund back for 2 weeks, or like these challenges that are genuinely hard when becoming an adult. But you got to work on the team where they decided as a team what their answer would be and what their solution would be. So it was solutions oriented, but really rooted in like things they will probably experience as adults. And it took the college going experience into something that was really individualized to very community oriented and team focused. So that's just an example I wanted to share because I've been thinking about watching that game happen for a while now.
I can jump in with another question we got around those student surveys. If the Promesa team could share a little more what methods you use to distribute student surveys. And then I might just add one other piece to this question, which is, how do you develop the surveys? Are they sort of locally developed, or do you work with a vendor, or how does that work?
I can share a little bit about the way that we have done surveys at Roosevelt High School. Roosevelt High School is a one-to-one school, meaning that each of our students have a device, either a Chromebook or an iPad. So through our work with the administration and our tracking systems, we were able to create surveys that automatically get distributed to all the students on the campus. And once students fill out the survey, we're able to provide some sort of incentive or a thank you for filling out the survey. As far as like the actual construction of the surveys, we do a few things. We do collaboration with students, like focus groups, who kind of help us identify, how would you ask this question? If we're trying to get this data, how would your peers help us answer these questions? We also do a lot of collaborative work with our partners. So partners are also able to support in or put in questions that they're also curious about. So when we do the evaluation and summary of the findings, it serves the whole collaborative. It's not just like for the Promesa team, we're able to share the findings with the whole school. And now that we have Matt, who is our director, he's also been crucial and key in ensuring that we're creating quality surveys and analyzing the data putting it in perspective, being able to break it down for our students and families and administrations in ways that really help us elevate and highlight the needs, and then that way we can adjust. I don't know if anyone has anything else to add from the team, but that would be just an example from Roosevelt. There are other times when we do actually hard copies as well. And with partnership with our teachers or doing advisory or homeroom, we're able to just, distribute the surveys, get them done on the spot, and then analyze the data. So it just depends on our school sites. We really ensure that we are customizing the needs or the forms of distributing surveys based on our schools.
Thank you. That was super helpful. I'm not sure if anyone else has anything to add to that. Okay. I think I see one more question in the hopper. We're getting a lot of thank yous. I should probably just pause and say that. A lot of huge kudos to you all in your work. So couldn't go forward without saying that. Are there any suggestions or best practice models for community support for learners with disabilities?
I might just speak a little bit because we are at America's Promise very interested in supports for students with disabilities, and admittedly these case studies are not specifically for that student group, but some of our models and suggestions about relationship building and the sense of belonging, we would argue are equally, if not more important for students with disabilities as well in their classrooms and with the adults that support them. They need to be treated as adults or as young people with the needs that need to be met. But we appreciate that question, and I will also give Promesa a chance to reflect on it if they have any suggestions. But we think these case studies can apply to a variety of different student groups in different situations.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. I think you really hit the nail on the head there with that one. Although we don't work directly with students with disabilities, there are some English learners who simultaneously have an IEP. And I think really approaching students with the asset-based approach is key, right? Again, moving from like what's wrong with you to what is right with you. How can we build on that? What are your strengths? And really helping students develop those strengths even further and focus on those strengths, I think is a great strategy to really build confidence in these students and also just help them continue with their academic, not just their academic goals, but just in general, building confidence for life.
Another example of our ways that we're trying to grow in that area is that we're very intentional when we do campus-wide events or initiatives that we're trying to be that we tailor our programming to the needs of students. So for example, for Career Day, we ensure that we have a session for English learners where it's fully in Spanish, and then we invite professionals whose life experiences have been those of being English learners or being undocumented students in college and now being professionals. And similar to the special ed population, they are part of our student population and usually are now fully integrated in the school. So we also ensure that there's professionals or activities or curriculum that is built to really meet their needs in a way that they feel part of and not excluded from some of these campus-wide events and initiatives.
That's great. So I have a question for the Promesa team, and want to actually encourage all of those who are participating to get into the chat and weigh in on this. But we know LAUSD is going fully virtual for the fall semester, and I can imagine that this sort of requires a lot of adaptation. We heard about the Zoom rooms for young people to have an opportunity to connect with other young people. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about sort of what your key priorities are as you think about the fall and your support for young people. And also want to, to the extent you're comfortable, be vulnerable about what's really hard about this and what it may feel really difficult to get right or be able to execute given your focus on, I think it was Claudia who used the term language justice. Like, I think that's so important, and that becomes part of part of the calculus with supporting young people in a virtual setting. So I want to just kick it over to you about how you're thinking about it, and also what are the challenges that you know you have to overcome.
For sure, I can give you a quick overview and then I'll pass it to Claudia to talk more specifically about the EL work. So part of my role as a community school coordinator is I'm also part of several committees and teams within the school site. So one of the committees that I serve in is the reopening school committee. So this committee is charged with figuring out how will we reopen based on the information we have from the district. So earlier we talked about a early warning indicator tracker system. So this system is literally like a huge database that has every single student in the school. It includes data around like GPAs, needs. It also includes data about what partners in their community are serving them. So that we're able to see the gaps and see what students are not being served by any of our community partners, either academically or wellness. And now that we're going to be starting virtually, what we're also going to be implementing is having our school personnel and our community partners on a bi-weekly, sometimes weekly basis, make calls to a specific cohort, either their cohort of students that they're already serving or supporting the school with campus-wide calls. So this is going to give us data to continue to see how can we maximize the impact of our partners? What are ways that we can support more intentionally the students and families and the needs? And I think some of the challenges is there's still a lot of unknowns. We're still working and negotiating with the UTLA, with the district about minutes, ways of teaching, tools to use. So there's still a lot of unknowns. So that's definitely a little nerve-wracking, if I'm being honest. Also, just the times are so fluid and things are changing so quickly. So we mentioned earlier too, our localized resource guide. We are a really small team. We're mighty, but we're small. So being able to constantly update that guide to really reflect live data is one of the challenges. We don't have our own communications department. The staff kind of supports, ensure that those resources are up to date as much as we can. I think other blind spots is just like, we know that families are things are gonna get worse before they get better. So there are going to be some folks experiencing homelessness if they're not able to pay rent. We are going to have higher cases of COVID as things continue to get worse. Families are struggling with food insecurity. And then it sounds like the district is going to be a little more strict on how they're going to track attendance and participation and grading policies. So it's going to be a challenge for us to be able to balance ensuring that our students and families have those things that they need, and try to help them succeed as much as they can, right? It's hard to ask a young person to be on a Zoom call or a Zoom class for an hour when their family's trying to figure out how they're gonna pay rent, how they're gonna put food on the table, just the overall overwhelmness and stress of being part of a world pandemic, right? I think those are very real. So yeah, I'll pause there and see if Claudia wants to add anything about the EL support.
Yeah, I think everything you shared is really on point, Carolina. And I think, yeah, those relationships and communication are going to be key. So I think just making sure that we continue our biweekly partner meetings, that we continue fostering that communication with our partner teachers and admin at the school sites, key parent leaders and students is going to be really, really key in helping us move forward with our plans to support the students and the schools during these distance learning times. Some of the challenges we've seen so far have been engagement levels. Just people are just less likely to jump on, calls or Zoom meetings, workshops. And so that's been a challenge so far. So we're, brainstorming on what ways or what outreach strategies we can use to engage parents during these times. And again, I think also just understanding that these are very difficult times for our families is important. And also then assessing whether workshops are the best things to be doing right now, or whether we need to refocus our strategy and maybe offer something different. Carolina mentioned we were able to support families financially these last few months. So I know that was a great help for some of our struggling families. So maybe shifting our focus is where it's at. But yeah, definitely, I think it's going to take a lot of creativity on all of our parts to continue to offer these supports to our families and students in these very, very challenging times.
I just wanted to invite Cynthia or Jennifer if you had anything to add from where you sit.
I had some additional thoughts to the team's response. Carolina mentioned that the team conducted a needs assessment with all the partners to better understand the partners' response in the different ways that they were pivoting their work. And one of the clear findings across schools and challenges that everyone was noting and responding to, it was the need for technology access, and not just the hardware, you know, the actual laptop or access to the internet, reliable internet, but also the capacity building need for parents and youth to be able to access the technology so that they can access the learning and even the resources, right, and the workshops that partners are offering. And so right now, I know the team is going to be using the learning, the lessons learned from that needs assessment to help inform a collective response and advocate for addressing those needs and collectively. So those are a few. And then the last thing I wanted to say is that I think we've been talking a lot about the importance of relationships, and in the work that Claudia described and the calls that were made to the EL students, that the trust and relationships that the staff and partners and residents have built throughout all of this time is what we believe is going to provide us the most effective access to reach and connect those students and parents who are most vulnerable and who are currently disconnected. And so that's a lot of the work that Promesa has been is doing, and we will continue to rely on that strength, that asset, to address these challenges as we move forward into the new school year.
Thank you, Cynthia. I think that was a wonderful way to close and a wonderful way to build on what your colleagues at Promesa Boyle Heights have shared over the last hour or so. You know, people talk about sweat equity and the work that you put into your life and your family and your job and your community. And I think the notion of relationship equity is a real thing, and we all have to rely on it now. And you've done an incredible job building relationship equity over the time that you've existed with the young people and families. So thank you for all of your work and for sharing with a much bigger audience today. I'm going to kick it over to Liz to close this out.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you to the Promesa team for all of your insights. I think this pandemic has revealed that belonging and relationships in community are kind of the only thing that sustains us. And I think one of the reasons we've loved working with you is because you have this incredible approach to relationship building in your own community that has led to some really enormous gains. So I know that the audience was really happy to be a part of this conversation today, and we're just really glad that you shared your time with us. I just wanted to shift to some logistics for the attendees. This will be recorded, and you'll get a follow-up email with the recording, so we'll be able to share that, and we'll have access to the recording in perpetuity. I'm pretty sure we've shared contact information in the chat box, but if you have questions following today's event, you can email gradnation90@americaspromise.org or find the Promesa team, sort of depending on what your question is. And we are having 2 more webinars in this series, so you'll be hearing from other members of the acceleration cohort. But we hope that you will continue to learn about Promesa and try to build relationships in your own communities. And that is all. So you can all head out.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.